Hey guys, my name is Logan Shinholster, and in this video, we're going to be talking about Contractor Growth Network, which doesn't sound exactly the same as Contractor Sales Academy, but the two companies work together on a lot of things. So don't mind the name, definitely watch the content because it's the exact same message. I hope you like it. Check it out. Hey everyone, welcome back to Contractor Growth Network. I am joined today not by Alex, but by Mike Sesniak, and he is actually a high performance coach. So Mike, thanks for joining me today, man.
Logan, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited.
So, Mike, let's go ahead and just jump on into who is Mike. I mean, if you go, like we just talked about this before the call, if you go on your LinkedIn, you've got it all. So, can you kind of give us your background into who is Mike so the listeners know who I'm talking with?
Yeah. So, if you 100%, if you look at the LinkedIn, it's like, engineer, and then like, what? Like it doesn't make sense. So the easiest way for me to explain it, I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. My life revolved around where I could play soccer in college. And back then, all I cared about was making a lot of money so I could retire young and start a pit bull rescue foundation. That's what I wanted to do as a kid. And I had one conversation with my guidance counselor because basically my club team, my soccer travel team, we would go to these college showcases. They would list out every college coach that was going to be there. My dad and I, we would print it out. I would bring it to my guidance counselor, schedule time with him, and he would talk to me about like what schools I should spend time reaching out to. So I'd highlight them all. And one day he's like, man, you're good at math and sciences. You should look at engineering. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, do they make a lot of money? He said, yep. I'm like, sign me up. Happened to get recruited by a good engineering school in upstate New York, played D3 ball up there for 4 years, and I ended up with a computer engineering degree. And that's where I started my journey. Like I was always like building things and like entrepreneurial, right? Like if anyone's watching the video, I used to make duct tape wallets in 5th grade at a company called Says Wallets, right? It was sick. I mean, dude, look at it. There's a Velcro latch.
Yeah,
Like
it's got it
this
all.
is final camo duct tape, like credit card slots, coin purses, like will change compartment. We're not calling it a purse, right?
Yeah.
But like I was always trying to create, but my journey started in engineering because I found that it was outside of owning your own business or like a commission sales role, outside of something you owned, you weren't going to make that kind of money that you would in engineering early on. And that's how I funded everything. So I started 3 companies while I was in corporate, the last of which was my coaching consulting company. I built it as a side hustle for a year and a half, and then eventually jumped off that cliff and figured out how to build a parachute and haven't looked back. So that's kind of like how it all got here. But man, that 5 years that I spent in corporate at my last company was interesting to say the least. Lots of interesting journeys with anxiety and panic attacks and all that stuff that essentially cracked the door open and is why I ended up here. So it's tough to tell that in the LinkedIn profile, but there's a whole lot there. It was an interesting journey for sure.
So because I definitely, the whole idea of why I reached out to you for this was the mental health side of entrepreneurship. But I wanted to take it one step back a little bit. And why the chase for money? I mean, why was that at such a young age, like your driving factor?
Because for me, it was about retiring young, right? So that I could actually do what I wanted to do. When you're growing up, I feel like, now you got a lot of people talking about it, like finding a way to do what you love and like finding a way to monetize it. But back then it was like, okay, well, cool, I got to get a job, right?
Right.
I very much grew up in the structure of go to school, get good grades so you can get a good job. I'm like, cool, well, let me find as good of a job as I can that I can make so much money that I can leave said job and do what I actually wanted to do. And I just love dogs. So, I love pit bulls, and I wanted to back then, like, dude, my favorite show was Pit Bulls and Parolees. And it's still such a good show. But yeah, that was kind of it. It's like airs on really weird times at like Animal Planet, like on Saturday afternoons. Like you're not watching it, like I'm out playing sports or something. But yeah, man, that's what it was really about. It was making a lot of money so I could afford to do what I wanted to do and like have the impact I wanted to have in the world.
So do you think now that there is this huge emphasis, because Mike, how old are you?
29.
20. Okay, so I'm 28.
30 in July.
Okay, yeah. So you're a year ahead of me, but now let's say you're back in high school. Do you think it would have been different because now the idea is less about make a bunch of money so you can do what you want, and now it's just the focus on do what you want. So do you think your life would have had a different path?
Maybe because I think had I known what I know now, I probably wouldn't have just like so blindly gone into the whole college thing.
Hmm.
Um, I probably still would have ended up there because I wanted to play soccer at a high level.
Hmm.
But so yeah, it might have changed a little bit. Like, man, I lived like in the middle of these two worlds where, half of my family was entrepreneurial and the other half would be like just insanely educational, right? Like my grandfather used to play for the Giants and then he left. This is back when football players didn't make a lot of money, and he started a company. And then my grandmother on my other side of my family was the first woman to get a PhD in her field from MIT. So after escaping the Holocaust to come to the States. So like entrepreneurial world, it's like cool to bash traditional education.
Right.
Whereas, so I'm like kind of in the middle here. And yeah, I don't think it would have changed, but it might have. And that would have been the one thing that I would have just explored is like, man, like what can I create? Like if technology was the same as it is now, like 10 years ago, basically, like ballpark, when I was going through that college search, would I have been able to just find something to create?
Hmm.
And maybe it would have been. I mean, like, dude, I worked retail from high school through the beginning of my software career because the first year was unpaid training. So I would go commute 2.5 hours each way, Monday through Friday, and then work Saturday and Sunday retail at the same shop so that I had some money. And maybe I would have used that as like making money so that I could build the side hustle. I don't know. That's a really interesting question though, for sure.
And the reason that I asked that is because I own my own business, so I'm in the same boat where I'm not anti-college, but I was on the swim and dive team at Virginia Tech, so I had the athlete thing. I have a chemical engineering degree from there, so again, on paper, it's the same thing where you go, well, like what we're doing now, college really has no effect, but I'm shaped by the team environment that I was on and the education side of things, even though I do nothing with engineering at this point in
Yeah,
life, but like it, all the soft skills that came with it, like really shaped who I am. So
completely agree.
yeah, and I'm always curious to hear because like everybody, it's funny, everybody who's anti-college or university happen to go to college or university themselves. So there's
Yeah,
always a bit of a hypocrisy with it. So
exactly. And man, like I love that you touched on that because at the end of the day, I'm super grateful for where I'm at. Do I want to be further? Yeah. Do I want to have a bigger business that's impacting more people? Yeah, but I'll get there. And where I'm at this very moment is a culmination of what has happened, right? So if I'm grateful for right now, I can't regret that, right? Like
right.
it's made me me, and it's brought people into my world, and it's helped me develop skill sets, and it's built relationships. So, it's interesting to like theorize what might happen, but yeah, I mean, I'm super grateful for where I'm at, so I wouldn't have taken it away.
So let's jump on into the we had the background, the idea because when I let me give you like the backdrop of all this of why I wanted to talk about the mental health side with you um, is I on my uncle's side or my dad's side of the family, they're all recovering addicts, right? So I've always been very predisposed to the idea of like addiction's a mental health issue. It's not necessarily just like this illegal thing that you do. So I've always been predisposed to that, but I know for my own self, running this business, it's stressful. Like it's unbelievably stressful. Where personally, it all got real when I put people on payroll, and I realized it wasn't just me supporting myself and having to, deal with my own stuff. Now I've got other people that like I have to perform because if I don't perform, they don't get paid. So
Hmm.
the stress that I probably put on myself is rather high, but it's also one of those things that nobody ever talks about. Like we always hear about or we see the Shopify people on Facebook ads that are like, hey, all you got to do is sign up and you'll make 100 grand today, but they don't talk about all the shit that goes into it. So can
Yeah.
you kind of walk through your journey with this stress and anxiety and just kind of give us like a backdrop on how all that came to be?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. The Shopify comment's funny. What's interesting is like a lot of the ads that those people are making, like, man, the people that are making way more than those people are the ones telling it how it is. Like you need to put in like 30 to 50 hours a week minimum. So either way, neither here nor there. For me, so my journey in corporate was very, very, like, the trajectory is very linear,
Mm-hmm.
like, and what I mean by that is every year was either a big pay raise or a big promotion. So at a very early age, I had all the targets that I was seeking, right? Like I had the six-figure salary, I had the senior engineering title, I had the luxury apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, right? Like I had all these things, and on the outside, it was glorious. But as we know, when we hear these stories, like behind closed doors, that wasn't the case. And for me, maybe people can relate, but like for me, I have extraordinarily high goals and very, very high expectations of myself, you know, as it sounds you do as well, Logan. And I also didn't realize that social media was a highlight reel at the time, like I thought that I was looking at the blueprint and I didn't realize that people weren't sharing the L's on Instagram. So you pair that with the fact that I had zero clue what it meant to be productive. I thought it was like being busy, checking things off of a to-do list, like getting things done. I didn't realize that, like, if I wasn't working 47 hours a day, like I could still be productive. I didn't know that was possible.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of, for me, all of that created this recipe for disaster because I would sell 40 to 60 hours a week to
Mm-hmm.
my employer for that guaranteed salary, right?
Right.
I think what we're going through right now, hopefully this sheds light. People, it's not guaranteed, but that's just another
It's
aside.
on paper,
But
it's more stable, but yes, I know what you're saying.
exactly, there's most definitely stability compared to the world that we live in, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're in like a high ticket game where, you could close like, mid five figures in a day and then go a couple of weeks without a sale. And it's just a whole different ball game. I'm not trying to be ignorant to that, but in New York, there's no unlawful employment or disemployment or whatever the law is called. Like you could just be let go for whatever reason. They don't need to give one.
Yeah, North
Um,
Carolina has that too, where it's called a right to work, where they can just fire you, and as long as you're not doing it illegally, you can just say, "Hey, look, thanks, but no thanks." So it sounds like New
exactly.
York's the same.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, I would sell those hours of my work, and then every waking hour outside of it, I was like working on a business, trying to do something to the point where like I just felt guilty for not working all the time. This is my early 20s, man. I'm like 23 years old, and like I had to literally wrestle with the idea of like going out for a friend's birthday on a Friday night and then feeling not so great the next morning because you have a few adult beverages, right?
Right.
And I would literally beat the shit out of myself mentally while sitting on my couch on a Saturday morning because I felt guilty for not working because I didn't feel great, right? Like ridiculous. Like it took a long time for me to really like give myself permission that, like, dude, you're in your early 20s, you work your ass off. It's okay to go have a couple beers with your friends. Like you can work Saturday afternoon. It's all right. But for me, all of this culminated in January 1st, 2014. It was the first day that I ever experienced a full-blown panic attack. And for people that might not understand, like maybe they haven't been through anything, context, at that point I had never been through. I didn't know anyone who ever had, like, I'd never experienced anything like this. I didn't know what it was. And my roommate at the time, lived with him for like 4 years, awesome dude. He would always go on a ski trip for New Year's Eve. And so I'm sitting by myself on the couch of this 14th floor of this apartment building watching Captain Phillips, and I was so fired up to see this movie, man. I've been wanting to watch it for like a year. And all of a sudden, if you've never experienced anything like this, it feels like there's 1,000 pounds on your chest, and in that moment, I picked up the phone and I called my mom because you just kind of seek some sort of connection, right? Like, I don't want to be that kid to call 911 on myself. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I'll never forget, I had to press mute on the phone because I was head deep in a toilet in the middle of this attack. That started about a year and a half journey of me going to the doctors, getting my chest x-ray, doing breathing tests, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Because back then it wasn't cool to talk about mental health. Like I had no idea what was happening to me. I thought it was a physiological issue. And it took a little while, but eventually, you know, the engineer in me had to reverse engineer what was going on. And I realized that every single one of these attacks happened when I felt guilty for not working, right? Which led me to understand that I had no freaking idea what productivity meant. And that just kind of like cracked the door open to eventually what would get burst through and lead me into this space. But that was kind of the start for it. And, you know, I don't think that you ever really cure it, but I found ways to work through it, and haven't had a full-blown panic attack in a very long time, after really struggling for a couple years there. So that's kind of like the landscape of it.
So it was really just because you were putting this self-imposed stress and anxiety that realistically, because I do a lot of the same stuff where, you know, I will map out, like if I'm going to go have drinks or something like that, like I had this we always do a team huddle in the morning with my team, and one of the questions, because we always end with a thought-provoking question, and one of the questions was, what are 3 words that your friends would describe you as? And when it came my turn, I was like, well, I guess one of the words would be non-committal. And they were like, well, what do you mean non-committal? I was like, I don't go out to anything. If there's parties, if there's anything, like I won't do it because I don't know what my Saturday morning is going to look like. And if I have to work, the last thing I want to do is be hungover, because like, God forbid I miss those 3 hours from 9 a.m. to noon on Saturday, the company's going to crumble. So it's like this BS rationale in my head that I can't have any fun until I've made it. But unfortunately, I don't have a defined it. Like I don't know,
Yep.
like, you know, okay, like great, like right now, like the next milestone in the business is hit 1 million, right? But then if I ask myself, okay, Logan, what happens if we hit $1 million? It's not like, oh, all the problems are gone and the life is good now. It's just like, well, I guess at that point it's 2 million. So it's ridiculous, because I always forget that the work is still going to be there. It's always going to be there when you own your own company, especially like with marketing. Like I know there's always more content to put out. There's always more ads that I can run. So it never stops. But up until maybe like a few months ago, it was always just like, you know, 12-hour days, and then weekends were generally 6 hours each day for that. So it was
Yeah.
that was like the average too. So now it's getting a little bit better where I'll take like a full Saturday off, but a lot of it's just self-imposed, and it does nothing except for just continuously stress me out.
Dude,
So
exactly. And like, here's the thing. I love that you mentioned you didn't have a defined it, right? Dude, we do that all the time. It's why everyone sucks at New Year's resolutions. Sorry to put it bluntly, but like, dude, what's the most cliche one? I want to lose weight. Very like awesome, great goal, but like it's not a goal, because it's like, cool, how much and by when, right? If you don't know what the target is, we can never celebrate the fact that we did anything.
right.
And you could lose 35 pounds, but you've been like, oh, well, it could have been 50. Well, dude, what was your target from the get-go? Like, you lost 35 pounds. Like, that's freaking awesome. But we're going to beat ourselves up if we have that mindset. So it's so important. Like, we have to have clarity. And in high performance, seeking clarity is the cornerstone habit. And what we mean by that is when you seek clarity, everything rises. It's almost like that source of amplification, right? There's that cliche, a rising tide lifts all ships, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when the tide goes out, ships go with it. That's clarity. When you have it, everything rises. When you don't, everything falls apart, right? In this case, it's falling apart because we don't know what the target was, so we can never understand if we've hit it. If we don't know if we've hit it, how can we celebrate it? And if we can't celebrate it, we're going to burn out eventually. We can always count higher, right? It's like that I'll
So
be happy when type of mindset. It doesn't serve
right.
us.
So let's talk about this high performance mentality, because this is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. And you're hearing like, I don't know if my audience is I was this is a contractor, like landscaping, residential, remodeling, like that's the audience. And I know as like a marketer and somebody who's like big in this space, I get ads all the time for the Brendan Bouchards and the Lewis Howes and all those types of people that delve into this world. But if you had to explain a high performance coach and what a high performance coach does to somebody, how do you define it? I mean, like, what is that exactly?
Yeah. So I'm certified through High Performance Institute, which Brendan is the CEO of that company. And how they define it in all of their studies is succeeding beyond standard norms consistently over the long term while maintaining positive well-being and positive relationships, right? So we were joking about this before we press record. Like for me, it was a branding nightmare because I come from a very athletic background. Most of my network is in the fitness industry. I'm a competitive power lifter. Like all of my a lot of my content was around my training for a lot of competitions and stuff like that. And people just assumed, okay, performance, got it, fitness coach. Nope. So, and then on the other side, a lot of my clients always come to me because they want to make more money and have a bigger impact. Like, that's great. We do those things, but the transformation happens in the life stuff and they're always so confused about it, right? At the end of the day, high performance for me is creating this well-oiled machine that hits what it like can succeed in whatever it is that we want to succeed in, but doesn't do it at the expense of something else, right? Everyone listening probably knows someone who has what they might view as the peak of like financial success, but maybe their personal relationships are falling apart, or maybe their health's deteriorating, right? High performance is doing all of it without being done so in sacrifice or at the expense of something else, if that makes sense.
So you're trying to remove like the opportunity cost side of things of you can make a lot of money, but you're going to have no friends or family. You're trying to pretty much be the average of the best that you can be almost, it sounds like.
Yeah, and let's be real, there's always opportunity costs, you know, at the end of the day, but they don't need to be catastrophic. So, yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it, is like, what's the best that we can do in this situation? How do we really approach this in a very, very responsible way? Because, and at the end of the day, it has to be in alignment with what we want to create, right? What the it is.
Right.
Maybe the it is maintaining and nurturing those friendships. Awesome. Well, how do we do that in a way that doesn't necessarily take away from what we want in the business world, right? It's making sure that we're just approaching these in a very like holistic approach, and making sure that we're exploring those things. So when you really boil down high performance, there's like 5 main pillars: clarity, energy, courage, productivity, and influence. Those are the 5 main areas that we're really exploring, and then we'll dive deeper into it in terms of like persuasive skill and presence and purpose and all these different things. But those are the 5 main ones that we really dive into. And you know, as you explore those areas, those breakthroughs tend to help you create a lot of this more holistic approach.
So how does this differ from like a life coach or a business coach that I guess helps on the life side too?
You could argue that high performance coaching is a flavor of life coaching for sure. I think it kind of lives in the middle there, right? I don't call myself a business coach because my clients have way bigger businesses in industries I've never touched. You know, like digital marketing agencies down in Australia crushing like 30K weeks, or like solar companies out in Vegas. Like, I don't know those industries. I'm just the results guy, right? My clients are in charge of how they make their money. I help them do more of it without burning out. So I stay away from that business coach term because frankly, I think a lot of people just use that tagline, but they've never really built business. I help people just excel in whatever it is that they're doing. And frankly, when I went and I showed up to that certification, I'm like, you know, why are these people throwing that life coach term around? Like, I had a very negative stigma personally, and it kept me from the coaching industry for probably 3 years. But eventually I met Brendan, and I was like, high performance, like those are words that I could resonate with. Like, they like kind of gave me the permission I was seeking.
Hmm.
And but yeah, I was blown away when people are throwing that life coaching term around at the certification. I'm like, shit, like, am I in the wrong spot?
Yeah, because you're like,
Um,
how old are you when you're going through the certification?
27, 27, 27.
Yeah, so you could look at it as, well, I'm a 27-year-old life coach like that. What do you know about life at that point? And it's I'm guessing it's less about your personal experiences, more about you being able to pull that out of somebody.
Exactly. And that's the piece that I didn't understand, Logan. When I when I was resisting the coaching industry,
Hmm.
frankly, the reason was I was being like pushed into it. A lot of, like, one of my best friends literally like lived in my house in high school. One of my closest friends in the world. He was like, dude, I really think that you should explore this. Like, you could help a lot of people. But back then, man, like, I saw a bunch of 17-year-olds on Instagram with the words life coach in their bio. I'm like, you got no business, no clients, you're 17. What experience do you have? Like, I don't want to be associated with that.
Hmm.
And I didn't realize that your job as a coach, like, when we're growing up in athletics, like, a coach is supposed to tell you how to do something, right? They're supposed to provide the solution. But in the adult coaching industry, that's more consulting, right? And I do that with certain clients from time to time in certain products and services that we have, but not in the high performance coaching. I didn't realize that my job as a coach was not to provide the solution. It was to help navigate conversation and facilitate breakthrough, right? And I was doing that before the certification. I just wanted the certification to give myself like confidence in the sales process, to be like, cool, well, Oprah paid $1 million for this from someone else to deliver it. And like, cool, it like validated it in my eyes. But I didn't realize that was why I had that negative stigma. I thought I had to have the answers and the experience and the solutions. As a
Hmm.
business coach, as a consultant, I'd argue that you probably do, because I think the term coach with respect to business gets thrown around fairly loosely. But in this world, it's a little bit different.
Well, it's also like, I mean, Belichick wasn't a fantastic football player, but he's
Exactly.
a hell of a coach. And then on the flip side, there's not too many really good players that end up turning into fantastic coaches. So it like, you don't always have to, in my perspective, is you don't always have to have done it to then turn around and coach it. It may make it easier, but regardless of if you have the experience or not, that doesn't always dictate if you can then pull it out of somebody.
Exactly. I mean, I think one of my favorite examples is Tim Grover right now, and The Last Dance is all over ESPN right now. The story, like MJ's story, whatever it is. I have to watch it. I haven't seen it,
I haven't seen
but
it either.
Tim Grover was the guy in the weight room with all of these Hall of Fame players. Michael Jordan, Dwayne Wade, I think Hakeem Olajuwon, Charles Barkley, like all of these players. That I might have some of those wrong, but definitely MJ and D Wade, like all these players that are some of the greatest of all time.
Hmm.
And Tim was the guy behind it. Was he a good ball player? Yeah. But like, he didn't make it to I don't even think he made it to the pros. Yet he's this like ridiculous trainer in the weight room, like helping them recover and helping them become stronger. And like, yeah, dude, it's wild. So I love that example. It speaks to the same as what you're talking about. I'm a diehard Giants fan, so I can't give Belichick too many props, but yeah, he's a great coach and it's a good example.
Yeah. So the the high
Well,
performance coaching side of things.
well, I was just gonna say Belichick was an assistant for the Giants, so I can't hate the guy too much. But like,
Well,
yeah,
I'm a Redskins fan, so no matter what you say at this point, I'm already tuned it out Giants wise.
I'm
So
sorry to hear that. It's all right. I'll
it's
try not to hold it against you, bro.
yeah. So the high performance coaching side. So let's say somebody comes to you and they're
Hmm.
like, Mike, all right, man, I heard you're a high performance coach. I'm trying to get my shit together in life. Where do you start? Like, what is step one with somebody?
Yeah. So if we're talking specifically the High Performance Institute training, it
Hmm.
always starts with clarity. Everything always starts with clarity, right? We have to see clarity, because if we don't know the outcome, how can we make an educated decision on how we're going to work towards it, right?
Hmm.
If we have a destination on a map, well, that's amazing. Now we know how we can start to work towards it. But if we were just to give you a map and been like, here you go, where are we going,
Hmm.
right? Everything always needs to start with seeking clarity. Um, and once you have that, you could start to work into, cool, well, what's going to take to get there? Like, where else do we want to facilitate breakthrough? And there's a reason that that's always the pillar that we start with.
Is that easy to do though? Because like have you ever heard of it's called like a vivid vision? It's a
Possibly.
Yeah, so there's a guy named Cameron Harold who was the CFO of 1-800 Got Junk, and
Okay.
now after he grew the show that he's now written a book all about it, and he does a lot of TED Talk stuff. But his whole idea is you create this vivid vision, which means that, and I just hired a company mine's almost done at this point, where it's going to take a snapshot of what does your company look like in 3 years, and they like go. It was like a 2-hour conversation where they're walking through everything, and they're like, all right, Logan, like tell me in 3 years, what does CGN's office look like? And I'm like, it's got desks. And they're like, okay, well, like what color are the walls? And I'm like, I don't know, white, gray, blue, and they're like, no, come on. So it's like they pushed it to
Yeah.
make it like the most like, that's why it's called a vivid vision. But the clarity side of things is so hard to like understand what you want or where to
Right.
go. So
Yeah.
with that, I mean, do you walk through just like a questionnaire with them, or do you just, I mean, because there's got to be a reason that they're coming to you. So how do you pull clarity out of somebody? Because I'm with you on that, but I would say 90% of the businesses that I talk to have trouble with where they actually want to go.
Yeah. So one distinction I want to make, because I completely agree with you. You know, I've always told the story of like I'm the engineer, not the creative person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how you're explaining that, and I very much resonate with that. When we're talking about seeking clarity, though, the act of seeking clarity, the
Mm-hmm.
beautiful part about it, I think it's a blessing and a curse, which I'll explain in a second, but it's not inherently difficult. Here's the amazing thing about high performance is all of these habits, right? If anyone's ever read Brendan Burchard's High Performance Habits, he dives into all of them, but all of the habits, they're trainable, they're malleable, they're not that difficult to do. High performers just do them more consistently and more frequently. That's it. So with respect to seeking clarity, a great example I love to share is how Oprah starts every single meeting, which is with one question, which is just very simply, what's our intention for this meeting? Right? Setting intention is a massive subcategory of seeking clarity. And at the end of the day, if we want better answers, we just have to start asking better questions. So the company that you hired, right? They're helping extract that out of you just by asking better questions. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes a better question is just getting creative with the verbiage, because it might give that 2 millimeter shift that just
Mm-hmm.
unlocks a whole different element of it. So, I mean, at the end of the day, man, like we have questions that are in our curriculum, right, that have just been battle tested by tens of thousands of sessions. But
Mm-hmm.
people can also probably just jump on Google and be like, good questions around
Yeah.
whatever. And like at the end of the day, it's not that much more difficult. You know, sometimes, of course, we want an external component to do something like that. Just like you hired this company to help you with that. My clients do the same thing to help
Mm-hmm.
navigate that conversation and add my own art to it. But you know, that's a first thing I learned in engineering was don't cheat, use Google, right? And it's relevant everywhere. So I think that's really the crux of it. Yeah, getting creative, that's a whole different ball game. And sometimes you might need to spend some time to find that question that will really unlock it for you, and
Mm-hmm.
or maybe give you permission to just get playful with the practice. But seeking clarity is not difficult. It's the discipline to do it consistently that becomes.
So to tie all this back together, when you now look at your past of having this un not like not undue pressure, but just like like it's unrealistic, it's not necessary, all this pressure that caused all these panic attacks, and then now your job is to help people see clarity. I mean, how does if somebody who has all this stress on themselves, like let's say me, like if I go, I Mike, look man, I just put all this crazy pressure on myself. There's no reason for it. I work 7 days a week. Again, no reason for that. What does like a high performance coach help with something like that? Because I think a lot of people have that and they just don't talk about it.
Yeah, dude, it's such a good question. There's so much going on there. And at the surface level, I'll try and give like a generic answer that can a lot of people can resonate with. But for me, maybe this will be helpful for people. It really came down to building a healthier mindset around what I wanted and what it would take to get there, right? Because oftentimes those two things are kind of abstracted in the positive and the negative, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me, like, let's talk about like building our dreams, right? I have these financial aspirations for where I want to bring the business to. And I realized, okay, well, if that's actually what I want, I need to be making sure that I'm managing my time a lot more effectively, right? There's a productivity component and all these different things it starts to bring to light. I hate to sound like a broken record, but it really comes back to clarity. And once we have that, then we could go a little bit deeper and start to explore each of the different areas. Like, okay, well, maybe you have the clarity, but energy is not quite there. We're relying too much on an external stimulus to generate that energy. Cool. Well, where can we generate some breakthrough over there? Or maybe it's courage, like, not saying you specifically, but like it might just be there's some area that we need to be speaking up about and we're just not, or like a relationship that someone could really benefit if we would show up a little more powerfully in that area. It's such a big question. At the end of the day, working with someone like me, high performance is really just about, cool, well, I understand that there's so much more that I could be creating, and I understand I'm kind of the bottleneck, and I really just want to explore how I can perform at a higher level so that I could best be in service. Right? One of the things that I loved about diving into this, and again, like I come from an engineering background, so I'm very like datas, like I'm a numbers guy, and that's why I came to this space of coaching, because it takes a very pragmatic approach, right? Like, yeah, it's a seemingly woo-woo world at times, but the sessions are battle tested. It's all backed on some of the biggest studies that have been done with respect to high performance, which we defined earlier. And what I loved is, a lot of people will always say like, oh, well, I'm just not good at that. Or it's like, it's not, I just don't have those strengths. I'm not good at it. I'm an introvert or something. Like I claimed that about myself for a really long time. What they found is high performers less frequently ask, okay, well, what am I good at and what can I do here? But more often like, cool, how can I be of service in this situation? That's what it is. Like, how do I remove myself as the bottleneck so that I could show up more powerfully and best be in service? That was a kind of a roundabout answer. I wanted to serve people a little more generically there, but hopefully that gave a good landscape for people and for
That's an
yourself.
interesting question, because like the introvert thing, because I heard that before where somebody talked about people using, I'm an introvert as an excuse to not take action on a lot of things. So I like that you're trying to almost like remove yourself from the situation a little bit and just say, how can I best navigate these waters to make it fruitful on the back end, instead of, I guess, like diving into the feelings or into the emotion that's backed with it.
Yeah, dude, 100%. And at the end of the day, everything is just putting us back in the driver's seat. Like we can't control what we can't control. And I think right now we experience that a lot with what's going on with this COVID situation. But one of the parts of this study that was really, really interesting to me is everything that we typically blame our performance on, like things that are out of our control, they're actually not strongly correlated with high performance. So things like gender, race, like sexual orientation, all of these things that are completely out of our control. And there's a much longer list, but they're not coming to mind right now. They're not strongly correlated with high performance. And that does not mean that they don't play a role. Let me throw that out there before I get attacked in the DMs, but like they're not strongly correlated. Now, here's why that's powerful. We don't really control those things, right? Like we don't control where we're born or who our parents are. So if we were just to blame those things, like, okay, it's a woe is me story that doesn't serve us. Whereas it's empowering because, cool, awesome. Those don't strongly correlate. Awesome. Let me figure out what does. And every single one is trainable, malleable. Like we control them. They're not that difficult. So if we could focus on building those in, then we're back in that driver's seat, man. We're driving wherever the hell we want to go. We're back in control. So I just want to throw that in there because I love that acknowledgement of the introversion piece, because I definitely used it as an excuse for a long time.
It's easy to hide behind that, but I love that because, and again, it's easy for me as a straight white guy to go, look, like whoever's whoever's president, doesn't matter. I'm still going to do me because I've got this, I guess not like platform because of who I am and like how I was born, but it really is like, doesn't matter who's in office, like I'm gonna do me, I'll be fine regardless. So it really just puts all the responsibility and ownership back on you to make it happen. So it's
Yeah.
make it happen instead of making excuses. So I love that. So
Yeah.
so to wrap all this stuff up, Mike, where would be a good place that people can interact with you if they want to learn more about, maybe hiring you or more about the high performance coaching side of everything that you do? What's a good way to connect with you?
Yeah. So, dude, first of all, thanks for having me. This is a fun
Yeah, thank
conversation.
you. This is good.
100%, 100%. So, if people have enjoyed this, like the number one place is the podcast. I run a show called the Results Engine Podcast. So wherever they're listening to this, they can just type that in. But I'm just at Mike Szczesniak on every social media platform for the most part: Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Guys, if anything didn't make sense, you have questions, slide in the DMs. Like whether it's supporting you through one of my programs or not, like you just have a one-off question, get your questions answered, because right now, more than ever, I think we need to make sure that everyone's supported. So if I could help in any way, please don't hesitate to reach out. I answer all my DMs. So
Beautiful, and we'll definitely go ahead and spell the handle
yeah,
in
you might
the
have to
show
link that
notes.
up.
Yeah, so cool.
Yep.
So Mike, hey man, again, I really appreciate it. Everyone, if you enjoyed this, hit up Mike. This was a very fun conversation where I have all these notes of questions I want to ask, and I don't think I asked a single one because the conversation naturally just went in a good direction. So thanks again for hopping on this, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, bro. I appreciate it.
Thank you.